A man walking home late at night notices a woman sitting alone beside a dark moat. She appears to be crying. Concerned for her safety, he stops to help. When she finally raises her head, he sees something that should not exist. Terrified, he runs into the darkness. Moments later, he finds another traveler on the road and desperately asks for help. But before the night is over, he will discover that some encounters are far worse than ghosts. Tonight's story comes from one of Japan's most famous supernatural legends, the Faceless Stranger. Chapter 1. The Woman by the Water. Long before modern cities transformed Japan, there was a lonely road that followed the edge of a deep moat. During the day, travelers used it without concern. Merchants passed by on business, farmers crossed it on their way to the fields, and children played beneath the trees that lined the water. But after sunset, the road felt different. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence seemed heavier, and few people enjoyed walking there alone. For generations, stories had been told about that place. Stories of strange figures glimpsed beside the water. Stories of voices heard in the darkness. Most people dismissed such tales as superstition. Still, they preferred not to test their luck after nightfall. One autumn evening, a merchant named Kenta found himself traveling that road alone. He had spent the day visiting customers in neighboring villages. Business had gone well, but the journey had taken longer than expected. Now darkness surrounded him. A lantern swung gently from his hand as he walked. Its warm light illuminated only a small stretch of road ahead. Beyond that circle of light lay darkness. Kenta was tired. All he wanted was to return home. He imagined his wife waiting for him. He imagined the comfort of a warm meal and a soft bed. The thought quickened his pace. For a while, the journey remained peaceful. Then he noticed something strange. The night had become unusually quiet. The insects had stopped singing. The wind seemed to have disappeared. Even the trees stood motionless. The silence felt unnatural. Kenta slowed. A feeling of unease settled over him. He looked around. The road was empty. The water was calm. Nothing appeared unusual, yet the feeling remained. Trying to ignore it, he continued walking. Several minutes later, he saw someone ahead. A woman sat alone near the edge of the moat. Her pale clothing stood out against the darkness. Long black hair covered much of her face. At first, Kenta assumed she was resting. Then he heard a soft sob. The woman was crying. He stopped. A woman sitting beside deep water in the middle of the night was unusual enough. A woman crying there was even more troubling. "Miss?" he called. No response. The woman continued to sit motionless. Another quiet sob drifted through the darkness. Kenta hesitated. Something about the scene felt wrong. Yet he could not bring himself to walk away. "Are you all right?" he asked. Still no answer. The woman did not move. Concern eventually overcame caution. Kenta stepped closer. "You shouldn't sit so close to the water," he said gently. The crying stopped. Instantly, the sudden silence sent a chill through him. Slowly, the woman rose to her feet. For a few moments, she stood with her back turned toward him. Then she began to turn. Kenta tightened his grip on the lantern. As she faced him, her long hair concealed most of her features. Relief washed over him. Perhaps everything was normal after all. Perhaps she had simply been embarrassed. The woman slowly raised both hands. With deliberate movements, she brushed her hair away from her face. And Kenta saw something impossible. Something no human being should ever see. He stared in frozen disbelief, because the woman had no face. Chapter 2. No Face. For a moment, Kenta could not move. The woman stood only a few feet away, illuminated by the glow of his lantern. Yet where her face should have been, there was nothing. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Only a smooth, pale surface. His mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. Surely it was a trick of the darkness, a trick of the lantern light, some illusion created by exhaustion and fear. But the longer he stared, the more impossible those explanations became. The woman remained perfectly still, silent, motionless. The blank surface of her face reflected the lantern's trembling light. A cold wave of terror swept through him. Every instinct told him the same thing: run. Yet for several seconds he remained frozen in place, unable to look away. The faceless woman slowly tilted her head. The simple gesture somehow made the sight even more disturbing. It felt as though she were studying him, watching him, though she had no eyes. Kenta's breathing became shallow. His grip tightened around the lantern. The night seemed impossibly quiet. No wind, no insects, no sound at all. Then the woman slowly raised one hand. Kenta flinched. Her fingers touched the smooth surface where her face should have been, as if drawing attention to it, as if inviting him to look closer. That was enough. Terror finally overcame shock. A cry escaped his throat. He stumbled backward, nearly losing his footing. Then he turned and ran. The lantern swung wildly beside him. Its light bounced across the road in frantic flashes. Trees and shadows rushed past. Behind him, he expected to hear footsteps. He expected laughter. He expected something. But there was only silence. The silence followed him as he ran. His heart pounded. His lungs burned. Still, he did not slow down. The image of the woman remained fixed in his mind. That smooth, featureless face. The impossible sight refused to leave him. Minutes passed. Perhaps longer. Kenta no longer knew. Fear had distorted his sense of time. His only thought was escape. Eventually, the road curved away from the moat. The trees began to thin. Kenta slowed slightly, struggling for breath. His legs trembled with exhaustion. He glanced behind him. The road was empty. No pale figure followed. No faceless woman emerged from the darkness. Yet he felt no relief. What he had seen could not be forgotten. The old ghost stories he had dismissed throughout his life suddenly seemed less foolish. Perhaps there truly were things that wandered lonely roads at night. Things that wore the shape of human beings. Things that should never be encountered. Kenta forced himself onward. He needed people. Light. Anything that might convince him he had not lost his mind. Then, in the distance, he saw a glow. A lantern. Small but unmistakable. Relief flooded through him. As he hurried closer, he could make out the shape of a roadside cart. Beside it stood a man. The stranger appeared completely ordinary. For the first time since fleeing the moat, Kenta felt a spark of hope. At last, another human being. At last, someone who could help him. Someone who might explain the nightmare he had just witnessed. Without slowing, Kenta hurried toward the waiting light. He had no idea that the worst part of the night was still ahead. Chapter 3. The Roadside Vendor. The light from the roadside cart felt like a lifeline. After the horror beside the moat, it was the first sign of safety Kenta had seen all night. He hurried toward it. A small wooden cart stood beside the road, illuminated by a hanging lantern. Next to it stood a middle-aged vendor in simple work clothes. Nothing about him appeared unusual. He looked like any ordinary traveler making a living along the road. The sight brought immediate relief. The vendor noticed Kenta approaching and gave him a curious look. "You seem troubled," he said. Kenta bent forward, struggling to catch his breath. For several moments he could not speak. His heart was still racing. His hands were trembling. The vendor waited patiently. "Did something happen?" he asked. Kenta looked back toward the darkness behind him. The road remained empty. No pale figure appeared. No sign of the woman remained. When he turned back, the vendor was still watching him calmly. "You probably won't believe me," Kenta said. The vendor shrugged. "Try me." Kenta swallowed. "There was a woman by the moat." The vendor nodded for him to continue. "She was crying. I stopped to help her." The memory returned instantly. The silent road, the pale clothing, the impossible face. His voice dropped to a whisper. "When she looked at me, she didn't have a face." The vendor remained silent. "No eyes," Kenta continued. "No nose." The words felt ridiculous. Yet he had seen it with his own eyes. No mouth, just smooth skin. The lantern flickered softly between them. Still, the vendor said nothing. Most people would have laughed. Most people would have assumed he was frightened or exhausted. Instead, the vendor seemed thoughtful, almost amused. Kenta shifted uneasily. "You believe me, don't you?" The vendor tilted his head. For a moment, a faint smile crossed his face. Then he spoke. "I see." Something about his tone made Kenta uncomfortable. The man raised one hand toward his face. At first, the gesture seemed ordinary. Then he slowly drew his hand downward, across his forehead, across his eyes, across his nose, across his mouth. A familiar chill ran through Kenta's body. The same chill he had felt beside the moat. The same warning. The lantern flame trembled. The vendor lowered his hand. Kenta stared. His breath vanished. His blood turned cold. The vendor's face was gone. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Only a smooth, pale surface. Exactly like the woman beside the water. The same blank face. The same impossible horror. The faceless figure stood motionless in the lantern light. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Every explanation Kenta had clung to disappeared. The woman had been real, and now another stood before him. The faceless vendor slowly tilted his head. Then, from somewhere within that smooth, featureless face, a voice emerged. Calm, quiet, almost playful. Like this, the last of Kenta's courage shattered. Chapter 4. Into the Darkness. The words struck Kenta like a blow. Like this? The faceless vendor stood before him, illuminated by the lantern's trembling light. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. And yet the voice had spoken. For a brief moment, Kenta could only stare. His mind refused to accept what he was seeing. Then terror took hold. A scream escaped his throat. He stumbled backward and nearly fell. The lantern hanging from the cart swung wildly, throwing strange shadows across the road. Without another thought, Kenta turned and ran. He ran harder than he had ever run in his life. The darkness rushed past him. Branches brushed against his clothing. Loose stones shifted beneath his feet. Several times he nearly fell. Still, he kept moving. Behind him, he expected to hear footsteps. He expected pursuit. He expected that impossible voice calling after him. But there was only silence. The silence was somehow worse. The woman had not chased him. The vendor had not chased him. They had only revealed themselves, as though showing their true faces was enough, or perhaps enough to drive a man mad. Kenta's lungs burned. His legs ached, yet he could not stop. Every shadow seemed dangerous. Every shape in the darkness looked human for an instant. Again and again he imagined pale figures waiting beside the road, watching, waiting, ready to reveal their blank faces. At last, exhaustion overcame fear. Kenta staggered away from the road and collapsed beneath a large tree. For several minutes he could do nothing except struggle for breath. The night surrounded him, cold, silent, Endless. Gradually, his heartbeat began to slow. No sounds of pursuit reached him. Nothing moved among the trees. The road remained empty. Kenta pressed a shaking hand against his forehead. Had it really happened? The question lingered in his mind. Perhaps fear and exhaustion had deceived him. Perhaps there was some explanation he had failed to understand. Yet every time he recalled the woman beside the moat, every time he remembered the vendor lowering his hand, doubt vanished. He knew what he had seen. The memories were too clear, too vivid. The old ghost stories he had dismissed all his life suddenly felt much more believable. Maybe there truly were things that walked the roads at night. Things that looked human from a distance. Things best left alone. Time passed. Eventually, a faint gray light appeared in the east. Dawn. Relief washed over him. As the sky brightened, birds began to sing. The familiar sounds felt almost miraculous. The world seemed normal again. Or as normal as it could after such a night. Slowly, Kenta rose to his feet. His body ached. His legs still trembled. But the worst of the terror had passed. He began the final walk toward home. The fields ahead were peaceful. Smoke would soon rise from village chimneys. People would soon fill the roads. Ordinary people. People with ordinary faces. Yet one question remained with him. Why had the faceless beings revealed themselves? They had not attacked him. They had not harmed him. They had only shown him what they were, as though the fear they inspired was the entire purpose of the encounter. Kenta looked back one final time. The road behind him was empty, harmless beneath the growing daylight. Yet he knew he would never see it the same way again. The memory of those blank faces would remain with him for the rest of his life. Chapter 5. The Memory of a Blank Face. By the time Kenta reached home, the sun was high in the sky. The world looked ordinary once again. Farmers worked in their fields. Shopkeepers opened their doors. Children laughed in the streets. Everything seemed normal. Yet Kenta no longer felt entirely connected to that normal world. His wife greeted him at the door. The sight of her face brought an unexpected sense of relief. Eyes, a nose, a mouth. Simple things he had never truly appreciated before. Now they felt precious. His wife immediately noticed his condition. "You look exhausted," she said. "Did something happen?" Kenta considered telling her the truth. The crying woman beside the moat. The roadside vendor. The impossible faces. But the story sounded absurd, even in his own mind. In the end, he simply shook his head. "It was a long night," he replied. Life gradually returned to normal. Business continued. The seasons changed. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Yet the memory of that night never disappeared. Sometimes Kenta would find himself staring at the faces of strangers, not out of suspicion, out of relief. Relief that their features were there. Relief that they looked human. At other times, he would glimpse a lone figure in the distance and feel a sudden rush of fear before realizing it was only an ordinary traveler. The fear always faded. The memory never did. Years later, Kenta still avoided the road beside the moat after sunset. Perhaps the encounter had been supernatural. Perhaps there was some explanation beyond his understanding. He never discovered the truth. And eventually, he stopped searching for answers. Some mysteries refused to be solved. Instead, he told the story from time to time. Most people laughed. Some listened politely. A few seemed genuinely disturbed. Kenta never argued with those who doubted him. Had he not witnessed it himself, he might have doubted it as well. After all, the tale sounded impossible. A woman with no face. A vendor with no face. Two encounters on a lonely road in the middle of the night. It felt more like a legend than a memory. But perhaps that is how legends begin. Someone experiences something strange. A story is told, then told again. Over time, the details change. The truth becomes difficult to separate from imagination. Yet something remains. A small piece of the original fear. A small piece of the original mystery. And so the story survived. A traveler encounters a woman crying beside a dark stretch of water. He approaches to help. She raises her head, and where her face should be, there is nothing. Terrified, he runs into the night. Soon afterward, he meets another traveler and begs for help. The stranger listens patiently, then raises a hand to his face and asks a single question. Like this? Whether the story is true, no one can say. Perhaps it is only a ghost story. Perhaps it is only a legend told on dark nights. But even today, there are lonely roads few people enjoy walking after sunset. And if you ever encounter a solitary figure sitting quietly beside the water, you may remember this tale. You may hesitate before approaching, and you may think twice before asking a stranger to look up. The end.